What's up, YouTube and Instagram? I've got a little project I'm working on. I have a client, and I just thought I would go stream it for a while, show you some of the stuff that I do, maybe hear what you guys do, just mess around a little bit. So I have this character that I have to do. The description is that he's the head of this agency. It's for a food company. He's the head of this food agency, and there's a mystery to be solved. So they want this kind of Dr. Evil, kind of shadowy figure. So one of the things is when you're thinking about designing character, I picked this character first because you really want to focus on silhouette. Like that's kind of one of the first defining factors of character design. So usually I just start with thumbnails, and I'm ultimately going to be working with kind of this portrait-shaped canvas. And these are really fast, blocky, simple. Because one of the first things that the eye sees is contrast, darks and lights, and then followed by shape. So big shape, small shape, round, angle, where edges are, basically. So in order to create an appealing character, and I picked this character because he's supposed to be a shadowy figure, we can really focus on the silhouette. So like I said, I like to start with thumbnails, and I'll do like 10, 15 of them until I find something I want. This is obviously kind of your most basic portrait, kind of lame. So we're going to try some other things. Maybe we'll do more of a profile. And one of the things when you're thinking about an image, particularly with character, is the intent of the final image. So it's kind of different if you're telling a story and you're trying to produce a story that has like a scene and a sequence of the setting, and you're sort of laying out the story. But if you're doing it purely for character purposes, just to design a character and get really across this character, much like you might see in a fine art portrait, the intent is much different. So my intent here is not really to tell a long story other than the details that are within the image. So the reason I bring this up is because that helps you formulate what you want to do with your design. So in this case, since I'm just showing a character, and he's a silhouette character, he's in shadow, he's kind of, like I said, a Dr. Evil, Inspector Gadget type bad guy. Oh, hey, Food Done It. I'm actually using some thumbnails of your design. I'm not giving away anything, but we're just going to do some quick thumbnails to talk about character design. So I'm going to use this and then branch off and do something special for you guys. So one of the things, like I said, you talk about intent. So in this case, we're doing a specific portrait, and if we're going to do someone who's kind of a shadowy figure, who's your Dr. Evil, your bad guy from Inspector Gadget, who's always in shadow. I'm not worried about a landscape. I'm not worried about a scene here. I'm really worried about the style, the shape of the character. And I know with the, like I said, intent, I know that it's going to probably be backlit because I want to have some detail, say, along here, along the front of the face, and perhaps along the side. So most of this is going to be dark. You know, we're not going to get a whole lot of detail here. So in this case, so this is, like I said early on, the reason I picked this this character is because we can really focus on the silhouette, the shape of the character. So I'm just going to mess around with a couple of different shapes here until I find something that I like. Like I said, keeping it loose and simple. And I'm ultimately going to end up with just kind of like a waist up character. So I'm just going to do something with like a hunch, maybe. Maybe this guy's got some kind of a hat. The hunch is kind of interesting because it creates an immediate story for this character. It creates a style of a backstory. This big hulking character probably isn't right for this. So I guess it kind of depends on what you're trying to tell through the character. Are we trying to tell that he's old? Are we trying to tell that he's young? Are we trying to tell that he's evil, that he's good, that he's got some intent? So it's all about what you're trying to do with the character. So I'm going to do... So we could do something with kind of an arch back. Maybe almost looking down. This kind of creates a sense of, omniscience, kind of a annoyed or pompous looking down on you. We could also, because we're talking about a shadowy figure, we could do it from the back. And this way, the lighting can feed in also with the pose of the character. So by establishing it from the back, we can still have some rim lighting, but perhaps we can reveal a little bit more because we're not showing the face in the first thing. One of the things I like to do, if you still want to get across a certain amount of character, but you want to show them from the back, is you have them looking over their shoulder. And since the project that I'm working on, it tends to do with kind of sinister characters anyway, this is totally fine. It kind of creates this looking over your shoulder sense of paranoia, kind of evil. So when thinking about character and silhouette and shape, you also want to think about the posture and the pose, because the pose is going to dictate ultimately what types of emotions and evocative feelings that you're trying to get across. So now I'm trying some stuff with more angular shapes. Just to see, I've been doing kind of basic rounded heads and round shapes and stuff, kind of the standards. Hey, Whodunit. Yeah, I mentioned briefly, so I'm just kind of using some brainstorming from your project just to do some character design. Obviously, I'm not going to reveal the insights of your characters, but yeah, just kind of using some explorations in character, using your theme to kind of demo some of the ways that I work with character. So shout out to Whodunit. If you guys are in the New York area and you also like food, which who doesn't? Check out Whodunit. They do food tours, and part of the tour is that it's themed with kind of this wrapped up mystery. So, and I was lucky enough to be involved in this, and I've done the character designs for their past two. So they have two stories, two mysteries to solve, and they're working on a third one. So you kind of go around town and you try out these restaurants, and they've got this cool story that you're also trying to solve a mystery. And in doing it, there's clues hidden within the drawings. There's clues hidden along the tour, and it just kind of makes for a new and fun experience. So yeah, if you're in the New York area, check them out. Whodunit. They've got a pretty cool website that keeps the theme going alive and well as well. So although I like this kind of crow-like posture, I have a feeling it's probably going to reveal a little bit too much about this character, and it also doesn't quite portray kind of a boss, sinister type of, like, you know, a boss, leader, head honcho type character. This is a little bit more of like a henchman, but I'm going to put that off to the side because I actually do like that, and I'm going to probably use it for some other type of character. So we could also, you know, people like to try to avoid and not copy and use stereotypes, but, you know, a lot of that stuff is established for a reason. If you can put a new spin on it, go for it, because a lot of times those are actually the most effective. And stereotypes, in a way, have sort of created shortcuts, shorthands, to get to what you're trying to achieve anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and go for the stereotype of the guy, you know, the king, the boss, shadowy figure sitting in the chair, and see how this goes. And in this way, now I've drawn it actually with the intent that this is the front of the chair, but now seeing it, I'm thinking we could also do the back of the chair. That way we wouldn't have to reveal it all. But after all, you know, this is character design chat. So that's not really going to teach you much about character design if we just do the top of the head. But story-wise, that'd be pretty cool. We could just do the back of the head. So probably going to need see a little bit more of the chair if we're going to show the body. So, you know, it's kind of that standard stereotype sitting in a chair. Like I said, feel free to embrace a lot of these things that folks have already used and discovered, because, you know, as much as we want to avoid stereotypes and stuff that's already been done, like I said, there's a lot of shortcuts and things that have already been learned from this. And you can also, the other cool trick about that, at least design-wise, is you can evoke feelings and information that's already been distilled in other forms of media. You know, as soon as you see this guy sitting in a chair, you know, it brings up a lot of imagery from other films, other comic books, other forms of media that has already been established. So you sort of can use that to your benefit in terms of shorthanding what you're trying to get at. So as much as this guy sitting in the chair is kind of cool, it doesn't do a whole lot for us in terms of silhouette. Mainly because the chair is kind of obstructing a lot of the silhouette. Now, we could change a lot of that with lighting. Once we get into our final phases of rendering, most of these are going to be in black and white, the way that this project is calling for them, but I still include a little bit of lighting. So, you know, once we get in there and we do like a little bit of a room light, you know, along these edges, we can certainly help define the shape a little bit better. But in terms of kind of your basics of character design, this isn't really doing a whole lot of us, a whole lot for us in terms of silhouette. So this kind of approach is I'm going more for the classic kind of looking down their nose at you. And this is interesting in this case because it creates kind of a sense of obviously the pompousness and kind of the authority that we're looking for. But because it's going to be backlit, remember, you know, along the edge here or potentially the right side, it's going to create kind of a sinister feel while still maintaining kind of that realness, which actually might be perfect for what we're aiming for. And depending on how we light his face, we can exaggerate sort of some of these sharp shapes. think we want to go without the hat. The hat's starting to make it a little too military and perhaps kind of the wrong caliber that we're trying to achieve. But then, you know, that's something to consider in terms of the silhouette the hair creates. It starts defining kind of an age, but also the silhouette that we're continuing to create. So I think a taller collar here is going to be really important. You got to obviously figure out the line of the jaw. But I'm thinking something like this is probably the route we want to go with this character. And I think when I do the final, I'm going to tilt him up even more so that he's really looking down on us. And I think that's that'll be really, really helpful. Obviously, this was a rough, and there was quite some things to be desired from the anatomy and from things like that. So rather than make it full scale and kind of trace over it, I'm actually just going to redo it. You'll find that, I mean, you know, practice makes perfect, but you'll find that doing things many times actually helps you find shorthands and helps you figure out the parts that you were struggling with the first time around. So rather than me just tracing that or working in ink on top of it, I'm just gonna redraw it. And I normally don't construct faces in planes like this, but because this character I'm going for is angular, I thought it might be kind of nice to kind of work within the planes of the face. So now I'm starting to just block in some of the detail, some of the things that you don't see in the thumbnail. And again, because this character is going to be in shadow, a lot of this is going to be obscured, but it's still important to think about it. Mainly, not just the character that it builds, and you're still going to see some of it through the shadow, but mainly how it affects the parts that are in the light. There's just these little hints of, you know, like the edge of the nose and the mustache through the shadow are actually going to tell us a lot. They're going to start building the story about this character. So I'm sort of envisioning this character as it's going along. He's sort of like a chief of police or a head of a FBI. So I don't want to go too sinister. I don't want to go full on Dr. Evil, you know, Dr. Claw, I think was his name from Inspector Gadget. I want to have a certain amount of regalness to him. So I kind of opted for this front-on portrait, almost like a classic classic painting portrait. But like I said, we're always keeping in mind that at the end of the day, a lot of this is going to be really obscured in darkened lighting. So I'm really focusing on objects that are going to break silhouette, objects that are going to define the silhouette, and things like that. So we know that pretty much. I'm going to draw in a different color here so we can see. I'm suspecting that there's going to be light coming from kind of that direction. So we know that all of this is going to be in light. And, you know, luckily we can cheat it a little bit. We can say perhaps that much of the face is going to be in light. We're probably going to have a small bounce light on the other side just to keep the shape from blending into the background. So as you can see, these areas here are kind of the areas I really want to focus on, at least in this case, because we're really focused on silhouette. We're focused on shape. And in this, we're going to end up with effectively a silhouetted character. So I want to focus really on things that are going to break that silhouette. So I think the insignia here is really going to be important, especially defining this type of character. Remember, he's like a officer type character. And rather than get caught up in actual insignia from any of the branches of military or, you know, I'm just going to kind of make one up, especially since this is for a fictional thing. This character, this whole food endeavor is very much about spice and chilies and things like that. So I'm gonna make it sort of like a chili insignia. So as you can see, that's going to be nicely seen right in the light, where the light's going to fall. We probably have a pretty good opportunity for something right on the top of this tassel here. Perhaps some sort of button, a shape, some sort of object that's sort of protruding. Maybe even, again, breaking silhouette. We want to kind of think about things that are gonna change up the way this character is seen. So then we have this sharp collar that's going to come around, and it sits pretty high. I think we'll do like a kind of a classic like fold over jacket so that we can have opportunity. Again, these are going to be really dark, but I still want to know where I'm going to be putting this type of stuff, because even though it's going to be dim, you're still going to get faint hints, especially like edges and rim lights and stuff like that. That's going to sort of help define the shape. And I don't like fabric to get too rigid, even when it's on a character like this. So I always build in like a little fold like that. And here, where the arm is folding, this is going to be really important because the fabric's going to catch a lot of light, especially in the folds. We're going to get little hits of light like this. Even in a black and white character, we're going to work that in. So you could argue that the arm is blocking the light here, but obviously we're taking a little bit of freedom just to help define the shape. I'm going to put like a shiny rim along the collar here. I'm going to square off his head just a little bit. Just to give it a little bit more character. Since I don't want to give him a hat, I think a hat's a little too overkill, perhaps a little too more like police officery. But I still want to give him some sort of way to top the drawing. So I was talking about planes. This is a perfect place. The nose is a really perfect place to build in those planes, especially since we're working in silhouette. These edges are really going to pick up light. And I know it's weird I keep talking about light, but anyone who's familiar with my work, mostly black and white, a lot of very bold, like kind of illustrative stuff that you wouldn't probably say has a lot of light. But in the way that you lay out even blacks and whites, and I'm gonna do that kind of style for this because I'm focusing first on silhouette in this part one. You'd be surprised how much lighting can be conveyed with black and white and through just kind of the line work. So I'm pretty happy with this rough. There's still a few little things that need to be tweaked, but it's close enough that I can move into like kind of an inking phase and start really fleshing out the detail. So one of the first things I like to do, these all, I've done a whole series of these, like I said, if you check these guys out, who've done it. There's a whole series of these. And let's see, where are my brushes? We're gonna do like kind of a standard wash in the background. So I'm just kind of doing this almost indiscriminately. This is totally the same way as you would paint the background of traditional analog painting with oil or acrylic. You kind of get down a base layer. Luckily with digital, you don't have to worry about the order. You don't have to worry about lights over darks or anything like that. But these tend to be fairly dark drawings. The content we're dealing with is kind of dark in nature. So we're creating these kind of dark, painterly portraiture backgrounds, and then I kind of fill it in. I use my lights cutout shapes like window gobos and stuff like that to help kind of define the space as though they're actually sitting in a space. So now we have kind of a nice, simple backwash. Then what I like to do is, and these, even though they're black and white, I'm going to ultimately add a little bit of color, just like as an overlay, just to give them a little bit of a treatment, kind of a sepia tone type of thing. So, and this really helps. I put these in a pretty low opacity, obviously more at the center. Now, this is one of the important situations when you want to think about what your light is doing. Because we have established that we're going to have these strong rim lights here, and then you have to think about what that's up against, because this is kind of an issue of tangents and edging and separating the character from the background. So we know that this area along the this area here along the arms and kind of the neck and all on the face and the chin, that's all going to be really bright and kind of blown out backlight, kind of really hot. And then the foreground is going to be really dark. So what we have the opportunity, because these are going to be bright, he can actually be against a darker background. It's pretty common that I'll have a dark shirt or something like that, and then you don't necessarily want to have a really dark background. So you can create this light fill right behind the face, so that the darker color will stand out against the lighter color. However, in this case, we know that we're sort of, in a way, outlining this character with this hot light. So we can actually go pretty dark on the background. And it shouldn't be much of an issue. And we can always go and clean that up later, also after we have some more defining details of the character in. So I'm gonna call that done right for now for the background, because it's just kind of a filler, a wash, if you will. And I'm gonna go ahead and start blocking in what I think I want to do for the character. So I usually just drop that down to sort of a reference level opacity. Gotta label my stuff here, hang on, so that keep a clean file. Now we can dump this original sketch. So for those of you who are wondering how I ink, so obviously when I'm doing traditional pen and ink, I just use technical pens. I've got these guys, got like Micron in various sizes, and it's like a 0.2 and there's, and so I usually go over first with a fairly heavy one, like a 0.5 or even a 0.7. Kind of do my base outlines, and then I'll go back with the finer ones and do the details. And because these are technical pens that don't have a lot of give, I do the line weighting manually. I just kind of draw over it a couple of times until I get the thickness that I want. But digitally, I use, you know, I actually am not huge on brushes. I don't go out of my way to find a ton of brushes. In fact, I actually enjoy just using the standard Photoshop round brush and just using the brush menu to kind of get what you want. But then I do have a couple of my own that I do. I downloaded the Gret brushes pack, so that's what I've got here. And I've just sort of picked a few of my favorite. I've modified them slightly to do what I want them to do. But I think I have, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, like 5. And I usually don't really use many beyond that, partially because it's just the style of my work works pretty well with this set. But I also think that people can get really overwhelmed with collecting brushes and trying to figure out what brush is best, and then you get this massive brush box filled with stuff. You spend more of your time searching for the proper brush than you do working. So I'm still going to outline this character as I normally would, regardless of lighting, mainly just to show the structure and how I would do it anyway. But it also is going to help in the final stage when I'm filling in the darks and the lights. It'll help me really define kind of where my edges are. And besides, you know, it's better to have the underlying layer anyway. So I'm just going to go ahead and start inking the face. Sure, we've got the opacity. So much in the same way I would with a traditional pen and ink, I do a lot of the line weighting manually. I'm comfortable with that. That's kind of how I want to say grew up, but that's kind of how I got comfortable and learned how to do it manually. And it actually, you know, it works pretty well digitally. But more so than that, it gives me a lot more control. So the brush that I'm using doesn't have a whole lot of give to it. It does increase slightly with pressure, but it's actually more similar to an actual physical pen. So there's a whole bunch of different ways to do hair. Probably someday I'll do a hair specific video. But generally the way I like to do it is particularly mustaches. Men's kind of crew cut hair anyway also works kind of this way. As I usually draw it as a shape anyway, and then you cut in these kind of standard cartoon notches to show the break in the hair. But then I also add these silhouette breaker lines, because then I'm going to go in and fill that in anyway with a smaller detail line, and you'll see kind of how it all works together. Another benefit of kind of doing all the line weight and work yourself, you'll find that you actually end up doing a lot fewer undos. You don't flip around your pen and use the eraser. You're not really undoing a lot. You're kind of relying on your own control a little bit more to get the lines that you want. The one time that I do kind of use a lot of revisions and undos is big sweeping lines. Some of it's just technology, lag. But another part is it's tough to do, even manually analog, to get really nice straight lines. One of the warm-up exercises when doing perspective and stuff like that is you try to just do a lot of straight lines, all parallel in the same direction across the page. And you'd be surprised how hard it is to get a bunch of those. So I'm not exactly sure what I want to do with the mouth here. So this is one area I'm going to leave blank and actually do on a different layer so that, because I don't think a simple line is just going to cut it. It may, by the time I get the rest of the detail in there, like something like that may be all I need, but I'm not fully convinced. So I'm going to leave that one. Sometimes when you get a mustache in there, it kind of really messes around with the mouth, particularly if you're trying to do kind of this grim expression. So you can see here, this is about as light as the pen I'm using will go. And it has a little bit of texture to it. So originally I drew this jawline like that, but I'm actually going to give him a little bit bigger of a jawline. So when you're looking up at the chin to create that kind of sense of jaw, I generally don't connect the edge, you know, even if it's just a slight little bit, it shows that that's a fully connected shape. Shows it's a fully connected shape and that there's sort of a little bit of a concaveness there. So what's going to happen is when we get into this collar, we're going to run into a situation where we've got the other back side of the chin sort of disappearing, and we're going to have to resolve kind of where that goes. I'm going to do a little cleanup here. So on a character like this, the brow is really important. These stern, kind of aloof characters tend to have pretty stark brow. And line weighting is a pretty easy way to imply where the heaviest part of the skin fold is, where the sort of brow edge lies. And then, of course, where it fades off into the rest of the face, so we get thinner over here. And I'm actually going to take back this background so that you guys can see it a little clearer. We'll drop it back in. We'll check in with it to make sure our shapes are working. So a lot of this is really more for reference. I don't actually foresee the eyes being seen in the final image. Perhaps part of the specular highlight on the eye itself. But I'm putting it in there anyway, just for reference. Not only to show how I do it, but it's going to be informative once I get into like the kind of more lighting phase. So one thing you want to consider is the amount of lines you want. There's something certainly to be said for efficiency and creating kind of a smooth drawing and smooth fewer lines to sort of succinctly make the shape that you're trying to get across relevant. But you also want to consider what lines actually do. Often on a face, more lines start to imply age. This is not just true for drawing. This is kind of just the facts of life. So this guy, I'm sort of imagining a little bit older. So I'm going to actually not worry about, normally I wouldn't add these kind of crease marks. And like I said earlier, I normally don't work on these kind of hard planes of the face, but this is sort of that military-esque, rigid type of character. So it's pretty appropriate in this case. And I'm going to go back and sort of, I'm just doing the line work right now. I'm going to go back and fill in the detail lines and kind of the shading, etching lines that I normally do. So rather than just do like a straight line down the back of his neck, I'm doing these kind of folds, you know, for two reasons. One, again, to break silhouette, but also to show how tight this collar is and show a little bit of his age. Show that the neck is wrinkling a little bit behind. So here's a good example of me filling in line weight manually. I just went over that spot a couple times. And then to make it feel cohesive, I'm going to do this backside the same way. It's likely a lot of this is going to get blown out with lighting. Because even though I do these black and white lines in these characters, I do sort of kind of a fake lighting pass. Not just in the line art, but I do an actual light pass. And sometimes those break the black lines. So in this case, this is one of our important leading edges. It's going to be nice to have a important heavy line there. So going down this collar, this is where I can stop with the kind of wrinkles of the head and show the rigidness and firmness of this stiff fabric. We're kind of trying to make it seem, you know, like this guy is really buttoned in here. So I'm going to take a little more care to not really pack it in, pack in the lines and the detail and the folds and the wrinkles, at least on the collar, because I'm really trying to convey this is like a super starched collar. And I can pretty much guarantee you this is going to end up black, these little holes here. So I'm just going to go ahead and shortcut now and fill it in. Normally I do my fills after the line work. I used to get in the habit of trying to figure out, especially when I'm doing black and white characters where they have large swaths of black, like a black uniform, which it's possible that this whole uniform I'm probably going to do black. I used to try and figure that out early on. So, okay, I want to do this black, and then you run into these weird issues where you're trying to pre-plan. And planning is always great, but with this type of thing, something that's so heavily illustrated, line art, it's really difficult to pre-plan where you're going to have the swaths of black, because you don't want to have black right on black. It's really difficult to define shapes unless you start painting with white, and then you're kind of working in reverse. So what I've gotten in the habit of doing is I just do the line art first, and then as I'm going, that's kind of, I start making these decisions of, okay, we know that this is going to be black. So one way, and his face isn't going to be pure black, but it is going to be in shadow. So one of the nice ways to easily define the edge between these two so these shapes stand out clearly is I'm putting in this sort of reflective trim along his collar. This is actually something I do a lot. It's kind of, I wouldn't dare say a trademark, but it is a habit of mine that I do on a lot of my characters. You'll notice the clothing very often has like a rim along it. It's either like a folded hemmed rim, or sometimes in these uniform type things, it's an actual reflective kind of metal or a change in color tone. But you'll find this really useful. And obviously you don't want to go around and having all your clothes with rim change colors on them. But there's other methods and other types of ways of finishing off the edges of fabric that effectively create this same effect. Like you can have cuffs, you can just have the design of your fabric and have that naturally built into it. But you'll find when trying to define the spaces of two shapes and two color changes, even if you're not working in black and white, if you're working in color, the same principles still apply. You don't want to have, I mean, sometimes depends what you're trying to convey, but often, say you have like a dark black, and you know that it's going to be butting up against another dark color, say like a dark brown or a blue or something like that. And those two shapes are going to naturally kind of meld together. And depending what it is, and if you want to define it, you're going to need something to separate the two shapes. So the kind of easiest and most straightforward is just lightening one, but that's always not appropriate. Sometimes dark objects are next to other dark objects, and you want to leave it that way, especially for storytelling purposes or driving the eye along the shape. But if you are trying to define the separate shapes, you can do something with lighting. You can put like a rim light so that the very edge of it is light, and it gives a reason for why it's light. But you can also create an intentional design object, such as this reflective rim type of treatment. So I'm just putting in kind of these contour lines, these sort of planar edges to help define this guy's skull, because I kind of imagine it pretty stark, pretty chiseled. So that's going to help not just define where to put the kind of shading lines, but also where the light falls, but also just to kind of define, again, like I said, the age. So I'm thinking, since this light's going to fall off here, I'm thinking of adding some kind of buttons here. It's kind of looking space captain-y, yeah. So I think I've pretty much decided at this point that I want the outfit to be black. Since I'm working in black and white, I'm going to go ahead and rough that in. And it's really going to help inform us how to do the rest of the details on the clothes. It's also going to dramatically change the feeling of this image. And you'd be amazed, kind of as you're working, depending on the mood you're generating, it's like a weird feedback cycle that you can actually start to influence the decision you make based on what it is. It's kind of the same principle behind how some people say, I like to listen to film score music when I'm developing film characters, or I like to, it's kind of that same. So I'm just going to fill this with black. And now it looks like he's wearing a turtleneck. So it's John Malkovich. John Malkovich as a poet. But we'll start eroding that as we move forward, and you'll see. . 'Cause So remember, I'm putting in a fold. That's really dark on Instagram. Let me pull that way back so you guys can see. I'm putting in a fold here just at the base of the chest. To create some visual interest. But again, just like I was talking about before, there's one of those sweeping lines that I end up doing multiple times. Just as I was talking about before, where I'm going to have dark shapes on dark shapes. This is a really good way to break up the space and define what we're looking at. So we can continue that rim edging fabric on the inside opposite fold. Wouldn't necessarily have to be that way, but I think it just makes sense to continue that design. So then this is going to fold under. And we'll get to see that kind of nice reflective. Once I do the little hatch treatment on it, you'll get to see how that works. So one of the requirements for these characters is to kind of put in a lot of details so that the mysteries can be built. The stories can sort of be built around them. And that's actually surprisingly difficult to do when you're just doing portraits. But you kind of think back to like Renaissance and these old masters that used to, basically do a still life. And all the details would be in the objects that they're holding. And in fact, looking at this now, I have a feeling I'm probably going to adjust this kind of after the fact. I think I'm going to probably figure out a way to bring his screen right arm in front of him, just so I can have an opportunity for him to hold something. Perhaps he's wearing rings. Maybe he has a glove with a design or a pattern on it. It's just another way to get in more detail. I do often include a little bit of detail on the background, but the style of these is kind of limited, so it's really more implied detail with shapes. So one of the places I often hide detail on, and by detail I'm not talking about buttons and edging and hair and whatnot. It's detail for the mysteries, for like details of symbology, numbers, objects that they can basically write their storyline to match. So, like a hidden number 2, or there's a anchor symbol or something like that. I don't know about you guys, but I have like this weird obsession with drawing certain types of clothing. A lot of my characters have collars. They wear collared shirts with like a tie. But I also really enjoy drawing epaulets or epaulets. I'm not exactly sure how to say it. These shoulder tassels. Oops. I just think they have a cool look to them, but they're also really fun to figure out the way that they fold in on themselves. It's just like kind of a fun. This is a little bit like Mickey Mouse and his gloves. Well, not just Mickey. Literally every cartoon character from the 30s wore white gloves. There's a lot of theories behind why that is. But I'm going to venture to say, despite all the negative ones, I have a feeling the main reason is just they're easy and fun to draw. When you're drawing a character 24 times per second, easy and fun become a priority. So he's really kind of starting to fill in right now. If we turn back on the background, we can kind of see how this is gonna fit in with the lighting. You can see how that rim light is really gonna help define this character. So I'm not gonna spend too much time on the front detail of the jacket, mainly because I know that it's gonna end up in darkness. But like I keep saying, it is important to have in there. Not just for structure purposes, but so you know where the lighting can fall. And depending on how the lighting is, this is a common place I put some of the detail work, hidden symbols. So for those of you on Instagram, if you want a more detailed look of what's happening, you can check out my live stream on YouTube. It's actually got the full screen of Photoshop. So you can see the brushes, you can see what buttons I'm hitting. You actually get to see a zoomed in view, whatever I'm actually working on, because the one I have on Instagram is just the navigator preview, kind of the overall view. And unless Instagram has changed it with the release of IGTV, there's probably a time limit, and I'm going to get kicked off Instagram. I'll log back in, but there's a likelihood that on Instagram this won't be a single continuous. So let's do the other. So yeah, here's something that changed from sketch to final. I drew this on one side and then didn't follow through. So since I actually like what I did on the other one, just reproduce that. So the other one folded down, and you can kind of see the crease inward. Just to vary it up, I'm having this one go up, and we see the button kind of on the other side, just for some variation, some perspective. So again, with the tassels of this hair, effectively, you can go ahead and be loose with it. Hair doesn't really fall super evenly all the time. It does have kind of a defined pattern. I was doing hair simulation for a long time in visual effects and studying hair patterns. Hair actually, in a weird way, does move in a really predictable manner, and it does have ways it likes to fall. But that sort of resting pose is semi-organic and kind of and just as I suspected, I've been kicked off Instagram, but we're still live on YouTube. So for those of you still with us, thanks for following along. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll try to get to them. I'm going to jump off fairly soon, and we'll continue this in a part 2. So I don't know if those of you who've taken life drawing with clothes, how to do fabric and wrinkles. Get these, what they call double breaks. They kind of make this butterfly U pattern. And that's really common in these areas where clothes bunch up on themselves. And it's kind of a shorthand in a way. Obviously, there's a lot of lighting and shading that goes into the way that those actually fold and actually would be rendered. But for kind of illustrative comic use, this kind of bunny ear butterfly shape is a really nice and easy shorthand. I've got to say this YouTube music is kind of funny. It makes me feel like I'm Mark Kistler. You guys remember him? Draw. Children's program. So the roundness of these shapes sort of, as they wrap around the back of the arm, is just done with this curve here. But also, it's going to happen again when I go to quote-unquote light them. I'm going to put one small wrinkle right above the first insignia, just to show, you know, that these are attached items, that they're attached to the fabric. They're not sewn in. I mean, they're not like a sewn in part of the fabric itself. They're not just a color change. Because remember, we're talking about breaking silhouette here. So by putting in those little ridges, you quickly imply that it's attached on top of it, and that's going to be further explained with the detail that I add. But it's one of the most important first steps of just structuring what I'm trying to go for. Crease here, since this is going to be black anyway. I'm just going to cheat. Okay, so I have kind of the base look. Base outlines for what I'm going for, and as you can tell, the silhouette is fairly strong. I mean, it's simple. This is a general style character. So he's stern. It's boxy. But if you kind of, one of my favorite tips for, I'm going to do this. One of my favorite tips for testing silhouettes is if you squint. So what I'm going to do here is let's just blur the hell out of it. And if you can still sort of read who that character is, or you get a sense of shape, contrast, you know, where the edges are, if he's boxy, if he's round, if you can still sort of understand who that character is, then you've succeeded. It's a successful silhouette. You can do that obviously if you're working on paper, just squinting your eyes, stepping back a little bit. Once you make those details go away, and if your outlines and your shapes are still working, you've done a pretty good job. But this is mostly resolved in the thumbnail stage anyway. So I'm going to come back. We're going to do a part 2 where I'm going to fill in the details, and we'll talk about some other stuff.